I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Major General William Wofford, Adjutant General of the Arkansas National Guard. Throughout his career, Major General Wofford served in a variety of command and staff assignments. He commanded the 2nd Battalion, 142nd Field Artillery, headquartered at Fort Smith during Operation Desert Storm. His staff assignments culminated with his appointment as the Chief of Staff of the Arkansas Army National Guard. He then was assigned to the position of Deputy Start Commander, Arkansas Army National Guard, and served his federal recognition as a Brigadier General. He assumed the duties as the Deputy Commanding General, Reserve Component, U.S. Army Armed Forces Command, Fort McPherson, Georgia, in August of 2004, and received federal recognition as a Major General. Major General Wofford was appointed as the Adjutant General, Arkansas National Guard on February 16, 2007. Please raise your hands and clap for my general. He's my higher, so make sure you clap. Major General Wofford.
I wasn't very sure. Well, Dr. Gerhardt, Mr. Westmoreland, all of our distinguished guests here, and most especially all of our veterans, those of you in uniform, those of you that have ever worn a uniform, thank you for being here to help us salute veterans today. I want to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and I chose this topic because of all the great work this university, other universities around the state, and other great institutions are doing to help our veterans in an area that I think is certainly needed. Now, I'm going to end my presentation talking about the very same thing I'm going to start with, and that's keeping our life in perspective. Okay? Every now and then, we've got to be reminded to keep our life in perspective. And I want to start by telling you, I was pretty impressed when I came here today to see all these guys in uniform. These are members of the Arkansas Army National Guard, the 142nd Fire Brigade, Northwest Arkansas. Okay. Warriors. Colonel Keith Clemmer is a brigade commander. I asked Keith, I said, what'd you do? You have to put these guys on orders to get them here today? I'm feeling pretty important because I got all these guardsmen here. I mean, I'm just a 2-star general. You know, I'm feeling, you know. He said, no. I told him, I said, you can either go listen to General Wofford or you can go to the motor pool and help clean vehicles. And it's only a light rain out there. I said, well, that just burst my bubble. And he said, oh, it gets worse. There's 3 times as many in the motor pool. So every now and then, between our brigade commanders and my wife, I'm reminded to keep my life in perspective. Okay? I'm going to talk about several things. Okay? I'm going to talk about the National Guard, our missions, the way we're organized, and I'm just going to speak briefly about that because half the audience already understands it. The rest of you, if you've been around a while, you either understand it or you don't care. It's the other topics I want to address. Okay? The National Guard, both the Army Guard and the Air Guard, are unique among all the other members of the military because we've got a dual mission. We've got a federal mission where, just like the Army Reserve, the Air Force Reserve, our active components, and that's to respond to the needs of our nation when the President calls in times of war or national emergency. But we've got a dual mission as the militia for the state. We've also got to respond with ready individuals and units whenever the governor calls when there's a state emergency. I'm not going to talk about our federal missions, the wartime missions that our troops perform, whether they're in the infantry brigade, the artillery brigade, our Air Guard units, or what they do during state emergencies. Most of you are familiar with that. What I want to talk about is operational stress. Something each and every service member, and I'm not just talking about our guardsmen, any veteran that has ever deployed, has ever been exposed to the stress of operations, something that they go through. I've got to tell you, there are warning signs everywhere. We've got traffic signs, There are stock market indicators. There are leading and lagging business indicators. You got health warning signs, whether it's a blood pressure check, glucose monitor, or whatever. There's things in our lives that tell us when we either need to slow down, speed up, be careful, or whatever. We've got warning signs in the military that tell us when we need to spend more time recruiting, retaining soldiers, performing more maintenance, or spending more time out in the field training. And I will tell you, I've been to Walter Reed a number of times to visit our soldiers, and I will tell you that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is alive and well at Walter Reed. I had the opportunity to visit one of our soldiers from the 875th Engineer Battalion in Northeast Arkansas about a year and a half ago. He was being treated for PTSD and mild traumatic brain injury. And I got to talking to him. I asked him what he did before he deployed. This young man is 21 years old. Perfect, healthy specimen. Okay? He was majoring in phys ed and wanted to be a coach at Arkansas State University. Got deployed. I said, well, how many IEDs were you exposed to? 14. I'm thinking 1 or 2, and you're going to go to Walter Reed. 14 IEDs. Now, not all of them were right there. Some were between the vehicle in front of him and where his vehicle was. Okay? But he had 2 vehicles completely blown up around him. Blew the engine out, blew the wheels off of it, knocked out, concussion. Okay? The vehicles we've got in theater today are very good, very protective. But if you go through that a number of times, you end up with some serious problems. Okay? So I know PTSD is real. What I was naive to think, anybody that's got PTSD or suffers from operational stress is at Walter Reed. I ignored some of the warning signs that were out there. I've got a friend of mine I actually went to high school with that manages the Army Community Service at Pine Bluff Arsenal. They provide services to service members from the area. Help their families, help them if they've got financial problems or whatever. Family support, basically, is what it amounts to. Okay. Went to high school with him. I hadn't seen him in 40 years. I came into this job, and he called me. He said, hey, congratulations. We got to visiting. He said, I need to tell you something. You got some soldiers that need help. He said, they come in my office on a regular basis. He said, I help them with financial problems, getting medical appointments or whatever. I ignored him. I thought he was a jerk in high school, and he wasn't much better 40 years later. So I just ignored him. I mean, I hate to say that, but I didn't pay too much attention to him. And Dr. Dan Bakke, the president at Pulaski Tech, talking to him at a community council meeting one day, he said, we've got about 250 guardsmen going to school at Pulaski Tech, and I'm feeling pretty good. We've got guys trying to improve their life, enhance their education, get a better job. He said, I've had 2 teachers come up and tell me, you got some guys that need help. They need some counseling. And that too went over my head. Okay. Some of the warning signs I should have picked up on, those reports of soldiers and airmen with drinking problems, the divorce rate, and most recently with suicides. You get a bad apple in a basket every now and then. Those were just problem soldiers that you're going to have in any unit. I ignored those warning signs. Okay. PTSD can strike anywhere. And it's most common in our communities, not necessarily from our veterans, but our first responders, policemen, firemen, EMTs, that are subjected to stress on a regular basis. Sometimes, hopefully not too often, but sometimes, they are in immediate threat of danger of their life. Individuals from sexual assault, victims of child abuse, they all suffer from PTSD, and it's not just our veterans. We get a lot of attention on our folks right now, and they need help. But it is prevalent in our society and our community, and I want to make sure you're aware of that. And what brought that to my attention, after ignoring all those warning signs, was visiting with some of our soldiers, some of our officers, senior officers that I had known since they were brand new lieutenants that I had helped coach and mentor over the years, that came back from deployments and was sitting down visiting, asking how his unit did, what they did. And he said, "Hey, sir, I need to tell you something. I've been diagnosed by the VA with PTSD. I'm going to counseling 3 times a week. But please don't tell my boss." I've got to tell you, if his boss doesn't know he's going to a doctor's appointment 3 times a week, sooner or later, some disgruntled soldier that works for him is going to tell his boss. He's going to tell him he's goofing off, he's got a girlfriend, he's got a drinking problem, or something, because he's not there when he ought to be working. I've talked to NCOs and officers. Not everybody that comes back has PTSD. The vast majority don't have PTSD. But every single soldier that I've talked to, as I talk to them about, "Hey, how'd your deployment go? What kind of operational stress or what type of adjustment did you have when you came back?" I've yet to find a soldier that didn't tell me, "I had some trouble when I first came back, just adjusting." Some more serious than others. Okay? And I use the word operational stress and PTSD almost synonymous. What does it look like in the workplace? What does it look like here on campus if somebody is suffering from operational stress? Reduced productivity. You can read the chart. They may be irritable, maybe a little disorganized, not as focused as they once were. Some of the transition of coming back to work, coming back to school that I've captured here, that again, I just want to increase your awareness. Changes that take place in the workplace. Even some of our full-time guardsmen, workforce, they come back and they say, "We're not using the same software that we used when I left. I can't find anything on the network. Your boss has changed, your supervisor has changed, you've got new policies. You feel guilty because you've been gone for a year, and people have had to take up the slack for you." Just the stress of coming back to work. I would ask one thing, as you see our veterans, you see somebody in the workplace that you're with or here in school that you feel is performing a little out of character, not the same way they were before, how would you deal with somebody else, maybe has not deployed, but it went through a traumatic emotional event, the death of a parent, the death of a child. They were going through a divorce. They had been involved in a vehicle accident and they're in a wheelchair for 6 months. What kind of concessions would you make for them? I would hope you would do the same thing for our veterans. I thought it was kind of interesting too, as I've done research over the last year and a half on this. Some of our Vietnam veterans get a bum rap because of some of their fellow soldiers and veterans that have come back with PTSD. Okay? It's not just a Vietnam War event. Okay? Every major conflict that this country's ever been involved in has had victims of some type of operational stress. Okay? In World War II, there were over 400,000 lives that were lost either to combat or non-combat related actions. Okay? But there were over 500,000 psychiatric cases that you probably never hear about, that you don't realize. Out of World War I, World War II, and Korea, the number of soldiers that had to be removed from the front lines because of emotional, operational stress were greater than those lost in combat. This is not something new. Now, What are we doing to try and help build resiliency within our troops? One, we're trying to make them aware, try to toughen them up emotionally and mentally before they deploy. This is fairly new because most of these guys deployed before we were smart enough to do this. Programs that we've got here at the university and other institutions to help our soldiers when they come back or before they go. You know, within our Warriors Creed that the Army has, I'll always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will not quit, and I will never leave a fallen comrade. That's what we're preaching to our soldiers now. For well over a year, we've tried to emphasize through the chains of command, down to our soldiers, keep an eye on your buddy. I've realized that when I find out that we've got a soldier that has got a problem with operational stress, it's probably too late. He's already become a discipline problem. So we're trying to get the word out. Help your buddy. If you've got somebody that's not acting exactly right, get them some help. Because if you don't, we found out that their families become collateral damage. Programs that we've implemented, of course, family support we've had for a number of years, but we've certainly increased emphasis on that. Providing transition assistance when they come back to be sure they understand their benefits, what's available to them to help them as they reintegrate into their jobs and their families. Try to help them with the emotional health. That's our emphasis now. We're reaching out not just to our soldiers through the chain of command. We're also now asking family members to keep an eye on their loved ones for signs of stress, and also employers, because that's our main concern, getting them help. Be sure they have time to decompress, that we focus not only when they come back, but before they deploy, while they're gone, and then post-deployment on what they can do to help themselves. We've tried to destigmatize the fact that if you go to counseling and get help and become a productive soldier, or you become a productive airman, it's not going to impact your promotion. We're not going to kick you out of the Guard. But the key thing is, if you don't get help, you probably will end up losing your job. Okay? The key is get help. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I told you in closing, I want to remind you to keep your life in perspective. And I'd ask as you look at some of these pictures, that you focus on what's important in your life. Okay? Keep in mind, and I use the word soldier. I'm talking about soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, any veteran that has ever been deployed away from home, answering their nation's bidding. Keep in mind that when that individual comes home, he or she may have a hard time listening to his son when he whines about being bored. Has a hard time keeping a straight face when somebody complains about potholes. To be tolerant of people who complain about the hassle of getting ready to go to work. To be understanding when a coworker complains about a bad night's sleep. To be silent when people pray to God for a car, when they've been praying for the life of a fellow soldier. To control your panic when your wife tells you need to slow down. To be compassionate when a businessman expresses a fear of flying. To keep from laughing when parents say they're afraid to send their kids to summer camp. To keep from ridiculing someone that complains about hot weather. And you can read it in the paper, but it tell you you've experienced 110, 115, or 120 degree heat. It's just hard to imagine. To control your frustration when a colleague gripes about his coffee is cold. to remain calm when your daughter complains about having to walk the dog, or civil when people complain about their jobs. Sometimes it's difficult for our veterans to just walk away when somebody complains that they only get 2 weeks vacation a year. I think this is typical. This is the way a lot of our veterans deal with the operational stress. They make light of it. I'd rather be fishing. 1 weekend a month. Yeah. Probably the most significant, to be forgiving when someone says how hard it is to have a new baby in the house. And he's had to witness the birth of his child over the internet. I will tell you, there's only one thing tougher than being a soldier, a sailor, an airman, or a Marine. It's being a family member that has to put up with us. Okay? So as a gentle reminder, keep your life in perspective. When you run across one of our veterans, whether they're in uniform, out of uniform, at work, or here on campus, please remember what they've experienced and have a little tolerance. I want to thank you for letting me get on my soapbox and talk to you about something that I feel very strongly about. Okay. Thank you.